Hey, good people. I like having that light behind me. Makes me look halo driven. Got my warm hat on in the cold shed again. One more thing I wanted to tell you about. I don't know if this would be interesting or not to you, but I found it kind of interesting and it's guitar related, so I'll run it by you. My son and his girlfriend are born in the late 90s, early 2000s. And they, like a lot of you who are of that generation, Zoomers, millennials, listen to older music retrospectively, having not lived in that period. It has a charm. So, for instance, he loves all the grunge bands. He's listened to the classic 70s rock, all the different punk genres from the 80s and 90s, first, second wave. Well, he didn't live through them, so when he watches them, it's that sense of newness. It's original. Whereas when I watch them, it's retrospectively. I'm harkening back. I'm remembering an earlier time that I lived through, looking at it through older eyes, if you like. And sometimes they like to watch, sort of nostalgic videos that are put on YouTube, and they'll be looking at it and commenting on earlier times from an alien perspective. They were born after that. Wow, you used to do that. They used to have that haircut. People used to dress like that. And one thing we started talking about yesterday was guitars, because my son decided to watch a video on YouTube called The First 2 Hours of MTV. And it was a video. It looked like it was saved on someone's VHS tape, so it wasn't great quality, and you could often see the breakup, obviously from tape production of the picture. And it was the first 2 hours of MTV in history, and it was really interesting from many, many, many different perspectives, but I'm only going to talk about the guitar perspective today. So we're talking 1981, the first song being The Buggles, and we saw songs by The Pretenders, Rod Stewart, Talking Heads, so, quite a few that have sort of fallen out of favour in recent times. But you can probably think of the music that was au fait in that particular year. So you had this weird combination of aging rockers, still with the 70s look. They still had that sort of 70s long hairstyle, but sort of short in the front, long in the back type of thing. Not quite a mullet, but you know what I mean. You'd see REO Speedwagon, Styx, all those bands with that sort of hairstyle. And then you saw the early beginnings of the 80s bands, the new wave bands, the new romantic bands, and you get all those different hairstyles, spiky hair, the early version of the Barnett, all kinds of weird perms and stuff. I said I wouldn't talk about anything with guitars, but I've got onto hair. But anyway, we started sort of evaluating, as we do, because we're nerds, the guitars on those videos. And I would say 90% of them all had Fender or Gibson on the headstock. All of them. So you saw Strats, Explorers, Les Pauls, Specials, Studios, Tellys, of course, Thin Lines, Fenders, Gibsons, and it really is an indication of how much they own the market back then. But every once in a while, about every third or fourth video, remember this is 2 hours of coverage, you'd see a Charvel. Oh, there's an early BC Rich with the Rico on the headstock. Wow, that's an early Dean. What shape is that? Or one of the Yamaha SGs on the Santana video. I don't think Santana was on that thing, but somebody was playing one. Sort of a SG shape, but obviously not the Gibson SG. I'm trying to think of other examples, but it was about 5-10%. You just saw those 80s brands starting to sneak in, but they were such a small percentage of the market, and most people were still playing the big two in terms of electric guitar. Of course, there were Martins and Taylors on the acoustic tracks. So it's interesting, isn't it, that compare that to today, where you have so many choices. It's still dominated by those two brands, but you have so many more brands that have broken in. It's like football. You used to have a top 2. Now you have a top 6, you know. So now we have PRS that are up there, you know. We have many brands that have sort of, and this is probably due to the expansion in quality of the Japanese brands that challenged Gibson and Fender, that became permissible for people to use and gig with. But right around this time, I mean, obviously there were early examples in the 70s and definitely the 60s with all the Rickenbackers and things like that. But you had this sort of influx of 80s guitars, mostly import guitars, just starting to seep into this period and become cool enough to be seen with on stage. But it was still very much a two-team league, if you like. It was like the Scottish Premier League. You had Fender as Celtic and Gibson as Rangers, and that was it. No one else is ever going to win. Poor example, I agree, but it's the one that came to mind. And you think today about the choices that you have. In the last video, I challenged you. If I gave you the budget for a Trump guitar, what would you buy? And the answers that you put below indicate a vast choice. Now, a lot of you still stay in the Gibson Fender paradigm. Of course, those are classic guitars. We all want those. But there's so much more in that top echelon, price echelon, that is, desirable and marketable, and holds its value, its resale value, and is top of the line production and great quality. Infinitely more choices than you had, say, in 1981. It's interesting how the guitar market, the instrument market in general, has evolved. So there you started to see the first examples of the Japanese Ibanez, Hamers, Kramers coming into the market. Now you've got Japanese are accepted as, a third team in that league. Now you've got the Korean guitars coming into ascendancy. You've got guitars made in other Asian countries that are coming into ascendancy. Lots and lots of choices. And you can really sort of see, in looking at that 2-hour block of footage in 1981, which was groundbreaking, and they knew it at the time. There's another interesting thing about watching this clip, is that it was self-reflexive, it was self-aware. All the people that were presenting those early videos knew that they were changing history. They said throughout their presentations, first, this is in stereo. This is the first music television. This is the first time that music has become visible. Now, it didn't last, and I don't understand why it didn't last, because back in the day, and those of you who are as old as I am, we used to love MTV. We used to get home, turn MTV on. On the weekends, you had a Headbangers Ball on a Saturday, 120 minutes on a Sunday, all the alternative stuff that started in the 80s, some great bands. And then you had Yo MTV Raps coming in soon after. And it really sort of curated music, not always in the best way, because it was, obviously too mainstream. A lot of the programming was too mainstream for my tastes, but they still had time slots for the underground stuff, for the alternative stuff, for the heavy stuff. And that was cool. And when that shut down for reality television shows, because they were cheaper to produce, I think the world lost something. It really did. And I'm surprised that they haven't brought that back. I'm surprised there isn't. And maybe, you can count Vimeo and places, stuff like that. But I'm surprised that MTV hasn't sort of revived, as a lot of things have done over the last few years. A lot of things that were cool back in the 70s, 80s, 90s have been brought back to new sort of interested, marketable viewerships. However, MTV has just stayed dead. Anyway, I don't want to get too much into that, but the videos were interesting from a guitar perspective, and an indication of what the market was like then, the price of things back then. There's things that you saw on those early videos. You'd never be able to afford them. I never had most of those guitars, ever. I could never afford those. I was playing the entry-level Yamahas, entry-level Ibanez's, stuff like that, that you wouldn't probably gig with at that time. And now they're probably worth a fortune, those things. So it's just interesting how things shift, and how a nostalgic artifact like that video that somebody has preserved and posted can give you, can teleport you straight back into that time period, and you can sit on your couch like you did in 1981 and see just what the world was like. Because it's not just the videos, it's the presentation, it's the adverts in between. It really does take you back to that period. But interesting from a guitar collecting, playing, selling perspective, to revisit that time through, wiser, older eyes, and also to sit with somebody who's watching it for the first time, trying to figure out what it was like. What was it like to be back then? I remember them both saying, this is cool. Why did it end? We would love to sit and watch videos, rather than, TikTok shorts and things like that. Anyway, folks, enough of my rambling on this subject. I just thought it was interesting. Tell me what you think. Were you alive in that period? Do you remember what the guitar market was like? What guitars did you covet from watching those early videos on MTV? Did you ever get any of them? Do you care? Is it better now or worse? Let me know in the comments below, folks. I always read them and I try to respond to every single one. I know very few YouTubers who do that. So if you get nothing else from me, at least you get my enough care and response from me, hopefully, to keep you coming back. All right, see you on the next one.